Here we go. All right. Well, welcome to the Gyaff, Shawn Simpson. Man, it's a pleasure to have you. You were my first, I won't say not international, but first Caribbean guest from Barbados. We imported you. So thank you so much for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Man, I know we had talked about it the end of last year. You asked if I would be interested in coming over and having an appearance, and I said, man, I asked if you were sure because I was like, man, I saw your podcast going on, and also just the level of discourse that was happening, and I figured, well, why would you want to have a conversation with me, as you called it, but then you said, man, Shawn, and you're like, come over, we could talk about anything, and I say, sure, no problem, I'll be down for that, man. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Definitely. And, we're just happy to hear different perspectives. And I know you have a lot. And, being from the same regional community, it's just nice to, well, obviously, aside from your and I's personal relationship, like just for my audience to just hear, your perspective and what, things are going on. But if you could just briefly, just for the sake of people who don't know you, give me a quick bio, if you will, just to let people know like who you are and what you're about.
So as you mentioned, we're squash people, and I've been playing squash now for 31 years, and coming up in that, I am also the 11-time national champion in Barbados, which is the record for the men's side of the competition, and currently number 2 in Barbados behind Kamal Kambabat, who's the current Caribbean champion. Have won medals at pretty much every level in squash, from the Pan Am Squash Championships, CASA, which will be Central American and Caribbean Games. Won medals at that as well. Got a plate medal in the Commonwealth Games in 2022, playing men's doubles with Kamal as well. So that's a little bit of a background on my end playing, and also top 8 in the Caribbean currently. We had a nice quarterfinal match last year, which went in your favor, but I always enjoy playing you, as I mentioned off air. But I'm also a coach. I coach full time now for the last 6 years, and one of your previous guests would have been the individual who actually certified me in level 1 and level 2 here in Guyana back in 2016, and I did my level 3 a couple days before the start of the Commonwealth Games in 2022 as well. So I would have been certified after that at the end of 2022. So December 2022, I obtained my level 3 certification. So I'm a level 3 coach now, and I'm really enjoying that side of my career. Having moved from the financial services, where I was in accounting and working with Sol Caribbean in their management company. So left that field in 2018 and made the switch to coaching full time.
Wow. Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that. Obviously, to your point, we did have some good matches, and it's always nice to go through a sort of a historical sports journey with somebody you've known for a long time, and I think we're still carrying that on well into our twilight years. More you than me for a little bit.
Yeah.
But a lot to unpack there. One is, I guess the first question I'd want to ask you, and people would wonder this: why move from financial background in terms of occupation to coach squash? That seems like a very noble thing to do, for sure, because the sport is amazing and needs to be built around the Caribbean. Yeah. But in terms of, like, I'm just thinking of things like like financial security, or just like usually you in an industry like finance, I'm assuming you'd want to capitalize on that while you're young, and you're still quite young. So why make that switch?
So for me, I was I was in the finance industry, and I got an opportunity to coach one of our top players at the time, Megan Bess, and she was still in that junior category, making her way up, and and within a 3 months time period, she shot up from being like our number two junior girl to being our number one senior lady. And coming out of that, then a few of our other juniors said, "Well, Shawn, would you be interested in coaching me as well?" And I said, "Well, sure, but understand that I'm working full time, so I can't commit to too many sessions outside of my main career." So I started off doing maybe another two or three juniors, and then they got success at the junior level, winning Caribbean championships like Samir Suleiman, Alex Stewart, and also Chelsea as well. So, as that started to tick off in a span of a year, it became more and more demand on my end to coach juniors. And like just seeing the development of those juniors over that time, I got more and more inclined to say, okay, let me go and do my certification. And then, as I said, I came over, I talked to Carl, and I said, well, Carl, would you be willing to do the level 1 and 2 for me? And he was like, Shawn, sure, come down, we organize. And basically 2 years into that, I got to a point where I had so much demand that I said, you know what? Let me ask if I can secure enough sessions each week. I may toy with the idea of switching, and I had discussions with them, and pretty much everybody was like, yeah, we would definitely do more sessions. So I kind of wanted to have a informal agreement with them that if they would do X amount of sessions, then I would feel secured making that switch. And that was pretty much what happened. And coming back from Gold Coast in 2018, when I got back to work, I thought about it for maybe a couple of weeks, and then I made this decision to switch because I felt comfortable knowing I had enough sessions per week to make what I wanted to make. Because I'm not a flashy person, and I don't really require too much. As long as I'm able to meet my bills and then have a little something to enjoy life, I'm pretty good. So, and I have built up enough savings, having worked in the financial area for pretty much 15 years at that point. And I said, well, if there's a hard day or hard times, I can always go back into the financial services side because I have that educational background to fall back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you find that because you're now fully invested within the sport, and I'm assuming a lot of your clientele is the juniors, like the junior program. Is it like, do you feel a pressure to have to continue to build that program? Because once the juniors go through their junior career and then they move on, maybe, and 50% is probably a big number that stay in squash.
Yeah.
So do you feel like pressure to sort of have to find ways to keep the program going? Because I assume that, like, I don't know what the association does to encourage more people to come into squash. And the reason I bring that up is because I think Guyana faces similar challenges. I think we've been lucky enough to have fairly easy access into the sport. There's some limitations that we face, like the fact that you could only play before you could have only played at certain clubs which were private clubs. So even though a lot of juniors can come in, once you hit a certain age, it's tough to get access when you're not just coming for classes. So there's sort of a bottleneck there.
Right.
So I guess my question to you is, like, how does Barbados approach getting more kids involved into the sport? Can anyone show up and play, or do you kind of have to be within the extended community? How does that work?
So what I would say for me, what I've realized is I've not had to go out and advertise or look for individuals to come into my setup. But I think that's because of maybe two factors. One, people know who I am, and they're like, okay, well, if you want to get your start into squash, go to Shawn. And then at the back end, it's also a case of where I think, just to be a little cocky, people would be
That's
like,
what this is for.
yeah, people would be like, yeah, if you really want to develop, I would recommend going to Shawn, because of the success my students have had over the years. And that's pretty much what I've seen on my end. But within Barbados, what we have going on is our junior program, and that's on the association side, and it's held at the Barbados Squash Club. And I'm the president of the Barbados Squash Club right now, for the last 4 years. And what we try to do is feed off of that program, where if individuals are starting, we try to get them into the club as quickly as possible. And the startup cost is very, very inexpensive for our juniors. It's basically $25 for a year to join as members, and there are no big loopholes or rings to jump through. As long as you apply, we're more than welcome to have junior members. And we are actually looking to make a bigger push on that end with our junior take up. And because we've done a little bit of research, and we're looking at our numbers at the end of last year, just looking at the makeup of our membership. So we want to have a little bit more focus on our junior membership this year.
Yeah. How's the government support like with regards to like sports in general? I mean, do athletes, in Guyana, I think it's with the growing economy, I think there's more opportunity for athletes to, at least associations are given more money to improve their athletes and stuff like that. But a lot of struggles we face with here is like the lack of resources. Mm-hmm. So we rely a lot on natural talent, and even when that isn't, even if someone's very talented, like they only get to go so far because they don't have access to proper training or guidance like athletes should. What's that like in Barbados?
Well, that's a good question that you asked, because for years I've said government makes sport at sport, and they always have good talks about we want to invest in sports, we want to support sports, but then after that talk, there's very little financial backing. And I think I was looking at the last few years' budgets, and the Ministry of Sports and Youth, the amount of money that they get is either the least or second least funded ministry.
Really?
Yeah. And for me, if you're looking at supporting youth and sport, and it's the second least funded ministry, that says a lot, in my opinion. And I know that things are slowly changing, and it's a welcome on that end. But I would say, and I could put a plug here, because I sit on the Barbados Olympic Association, and we have on the board for the Barbados Olympic Association, and we have been supporting sports tremendously in Barbados. There are over 35 sports under our umbrella, and one of the things that we do is we fund our elite, and or I should say there are different levels within the funding. You have your elite athletes, you have your high performance athletes, developing athletes, and then your emerging athletes. So athletes across the board in different sports are being funded, and the athletes now are really happy about that additional backing. So, for instance, in squash now, you have Kamal, Megan, Margot Pro, Amanda Haywood, to just call a few, and they're all getting funding throughout the year to help with their squash. And you're seeing the results now within our sport, where Barbados won their first 2 medals at Pan Am Games last year in Chile. So I could see that from our end, we're doing that, and we just need government to really pitch in some more and assist, and not just government, but the private sector. I think if the private sector can get in and assist the public sector, that will really up the ante on sports.
What do you think is like the hesitation for private sector to get involved in athletes, and just like in development, in human development in general? Because we always talk on this show, but private sector also needs to invest more in like the culture and art stuff, and it would push that industry. So, and sports is a good example as well. You can have athletes carry your brand and stuff like that. But I'm not sure what the hesitation is to sort of capitalize on that.
I think just culturally, companies in the Caribbean have predominantly been more focused with staying afloat rather than saying, okay, as you mentioned, how can we really get into the same community that's supporting us? Because if you look at it, if you peel it back and you say, okay, where am I making my money? Right? Am I making my money here in Guyana? Who if it's the Guyanese population that's supporting me, I really should be supporting the Guyanese population as well. I should be giving back. And if I'm supporting the community, there should be some additional support back to that company, because you're now looking at saying, well, if I support a particular community in Guyana and I know they're going to come back and spend with my company, or they may, if I'm an insurance company, I may get additional insurance premiums just because I've given some support to a sports person or sports persons, or even to a community itself with developing a art show or art theater or something, like whatever you're looking to support within that area. I just think that it just culturally we've been a bit more concerned about keeping afloat. So you're a little bit more reluctant to let go of those funds, and you want to try to invest them back into the company, or you may be a little bit more adverse and say, okay, I'm just going to hold on to this. I think that's how I look at it. They're just a little bit more risk adverse rather than saying, let me spend, because if I spend a little bit, I'll probably make back tenfold. And you can see that in America, for example. They're very big on supporting athletes because they know that their spin-off, if that athlete does well, and that athlete has his brand or her brand, their followers will more than likely go into whoever their sponsors are. For example, like the biggest one, the easiest one is Nike, where Nike supported Michael Jordan, and bam, multi-billion-dollar business now, where Jordan brand is even bigger than most of the other sporting companies out there, like maybe Under Armour, and that's just a subdivision of Nike. So that's just an example of how, if you create support for an athlete, you can now feed that back into the community at large.
Yeah, and also like it sort of just creates the structure for athletes to like involve themselves in or operate in, because if it's like on a meritocracy and oh, this opportunity is there for this sponsorship based on my performance, it drives the athlete. It inspires people under that athlete to want the same thing, so they're competing for this opportunity, and it could only do good for sport. I find ourselves, many times, and by the way, it is the government and public sector's responsibility to push athletes, but we're sometimes overly reliant on them and what they're ready to hand out or what opportunity they're ready to give to us, to compete and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's interesting. We did mention like the sort of culture of doing business, and I know like we in the Caribbean as well have like we were talking about it in the car coming here, like we have our own cultures of doing things for better or worse.
Yeah.
And Guyana, I'm seeing it in Guyana now, where we're like hitting this development path, and I think a lot of places that we're supposed to go while we develop it, we're kind of being hindered by this sort of culture we have that's a bit, lax and not as like the service industry, for example, we were talking about that needs work here, and I'm hopeful that it changes soon, but I'm wondering like, how does that even get done? Do you think it's like a question of leadership, or is it just like a decision that the people have to make and a vision that they have to buy into?
I think it's both sides of leadership and then the public at large. Like a group of people need to take charge. But I always say you need to you have to plant that desire, and that comes from leadership. And if you if you could plant that desire out there, or plant that seed, and people feel comfortable enough to say, okay, let me take a risk here, and once you could plant that seed, and then you could create the environment. That's how I look at it. That you need both ends, and once you could get that, I believe that would enable a big change in how things are done in the Caribbean. Because one of the things I always hear individuals say when they come to Barbados for vacation, it's always like, Barbados is just so laid back, like y'all are so happy go lucky, and I sit down and I'm just like, really? I mean, I think we work hard, but I think within our makeup here in the Caribbean, we know how to work hard but also enjoy life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between how the Caribbean is done and the other countries that are more developed. They're more driven to work hard, and then they do very little outside of that. They make time for vacation at the end of the year kind of thing. Whereas, as soon as we finish work, someone may go and hit a bar, somebody may go and watch a movie, and you take time to really enjoy yourself when you can.
Yeah. And which is super important. And not to say that, we should be, like a super, one of these like countries that never stops working, and that's what it's about. I think that's a big part of our culture, having a good time and enjoying life. That's what we're here for, ultimately.
Yeah.
Going back to the leadership conversation, though, I just wanted your thoughts on how in Guyana here, a lot of people really idolize Mia Motley, and are very fond of her, and not only, I think her being obviously a woman in a position of power is like a very inspiring thing. But I think the vibe she gives a lot of people is one of hope and integrity and stuff like that. I was just wondering, like, what is Barbados' thoughts on her? Like, is it, do they consider her as good of a leader as she's made out to be here, for example? And like, what's the politics like over there?
Well, like I say this, she's created history twice in the last two elections. Been in back-to-back 30 loves.
First woman? Is she the first?
First ever.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
No one before that ever won all 30 seats or won all seats in the general elections, and to do it back to back, it does send a message of support on her end. I think she's done a fantastic job on being very, very upfront as a leader. The previous prime minister was viewed as being very, very, very quiet. I'll use that word. And then when he did choose to speak, it was very much above the public's understanding. Like you had to, I think you had to be educated to understand what he was saying, because he himself was a lawyer, and some of the speeches that he gave, I would understand it, but then sometimes the other people would be like, what is he saying? And there were plenty memes made about him and so forth. But just going back to her, I think she's done a fantastic job on the PR side. She's always in the public and she's made a very big push to, I think, not only put Barbados on the public stage, but she's also making a push for the Caribbean as well. And I can see the definite good on that end, because more and more people are talking about Barbados and the Caribbean, and she's very concerned about climate change, and I believe that things will probably change as time goes by, because she's just constantly pushing the agenda. And but politics in Barbados is quite interesting. We have two main parties, which would be the Barbados Labour Party, who are the incumbent government, and we also have the Democratic Labour Party, who would have been the previous administration before Mia Mottley became Prime Minister of Barbados. And it's you have your two staunch supporters. Like, people don't tend to flip parties. So I find, for example, I could be a bit wrong, but that's how I view it.
Sure, no, absolutely.
I find the Barbados Labour Party is very much for the people, in the sense that they're very they're very much for the younger people, and they're very driven by youth. So their push is very much through the social media, and they will go into the communities and have discussions with them, understand what their needs are, what their wants are, how best to assist them. I think where the Democratic Labour Parties fell down in the last 10 years is that it's been more focused towards the older population, and that. So then what the older population wants is a little bit different from what myself and younger people may want. And if you're pushing certain agendas or certain decisions that aren't being really the focus or interest of the younger people, I think that's where you're going to lose footing. And I think that's where they now have to go back and really do a rejig of what they need to do as a party.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because I think that is very similar to what we're experiencing here. And traditionally our politics has been very it's been very absent of gearing towards young people. There was this big absence of reaching out to young people and connecting with young people. And I think the current president is what a lot of people expected our last president to be, because our last president was voted in after the other party was in power for 23 years, and he really had this opportunity to connect with young people. But he was quite an old guy. I think he was like late 70s, and he had this sort of vision that his intentions may have been good, but I think the vision was something that maybe would have been viable 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So I think it didn't connect a lot of people. And then when the other party got back into power recently in 2020, they hit the ground running. The presidential candidate and now President Irfan Ali, when we talk about PR, his PR is amazing. I think regardless of what his government can do better or not, the image he portrays is to me at least, is like what young people have been waiting for a long time. You have this guy who's energetic, hopeful, optimistic. He's very people centric, and it really goes to show how effective that can be, especially in this day and age when young people have access to technology where they're constantly consuming information. So you have their attention all the time if you do it properly.
Yeah.
So it's such an opportunity to connect with young people. And I think, in a way, he's like, I don't know if he looks toward Mia Mottley in that regard, but it's nice to at least hear again and to have a leader that you feel connected to, that doesn't feel like they're just a big boy playing games way above everybody else's head. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we felt for a long time. And yeah, it's interesting. I really think in general though there's opportunity for young people to, once they target young people, and we could see a lot of our development through there if they can connect their vision with what the younger generation wants, as we move forward in Guyana.
Yeah. And it's interesting you said that, let's say, what you may have ran your platform on and the things you wanted to deliver, you may not always hit everything that you say you wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what's happening in Barbados too. Sometimes you run on a platform and you say, okay, these are the list of things we're going to do in the 5 years, and you may only achieve 40% of those things, right? But I think the biggest thing is at least you try. You know, as much as you say, and we go through it in our own daily lives, you may you may have a list of tasks that you want to complete in a week, and then at the end of the week you're like, shoot, I didn't get to do this, I didn't get to do that. And if we really expand that, that's pretty much how running a country is. You may have a list of things that you want to achieve in the 5 years, but you know, just because I said I was going to do this and I didn't get to do it, that doesn't mean that I was a bad leader. There are things that we as a public don't know will be happening behind the scenes that you have to out certain fires. And it's similar to our household. If you're home and, you know, as you're married, you may have a situation with your wife, and, you know, she may need your attention. And then that takes you away from maybe doing your podcast one week, and then people are like, "Where's Alex? Where's the Gyaff?" And then, you know, you have to come back now and say, "Okay, well, you know, I was away for a bit, had some stuff to deal with, and so forth." And that's basically, you know, like, if you understand that life is not always linear, you know, you're gonna have your ups and downs, and you have to take. And time is very important. We only have X amount of time in a day, and so if you have to take your focus away from something and then come back, that's just how life is, you know.
Yeah. This just separate from that, and that concept of time. I feel like as you get older, you feel like you're on this you know, mindset where you're just watching time slowly go by. You're really aware of the clock, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that, but I just find that, like, you know, lately I'm just sometimes, even though I'm in it, I feel like I am just watching it happen before my eyes, you know, until the finish line, whenever that is. Like, it's a weird feeling. Like, we spoke about it, about, like, you know, sometimes, like, when you get, like, things like deja vu and you just feel separated from reality. It's, like, crazy. It's so much more prevalent as you get older, and it makes me really, like, think about how, well, I did appreciate, you know, when I was, like, you know, my teens and my early 20s, but how much more valuable that is to me now, you know.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were asking me, because I'm going to be 40 in another 4 weeks. So they were asking me, well, what are you going to do for your 40th? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. And they're like, but it's such a big event. I said, well, yes, it is, because it's a major achievement. But at the end of the day, I just viewed it as another day. Like, I just want to go about doing what I have to do. Like, there are bigger goals for me than just celebrating my 40th. But it just made me go back and think about, okay, what did I do for my 30th? What did I do for my 21st? What did I do for my 25th? You know, like, there are different days that, or years that you kind of want to celebrate because there were major milestones. So, like, your 16th, you're like, I could get my license. 18, I'm an adult. 21 is like, okay, I'm finishing university and I'm an adult everywhere in the world.
Yeah, I could drink in the U.S.
Drink in the U.S. So it just made me sit down and think about it. And then I just realized, you know, like, at the end of the day, everything that I did at that point, it was just about being close with my friends and family. As much as yes, you did something big, the one thing that was constant was I had my friends and family with me. And so thinking back about it, I was like, you know what? Probably just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it maybe like, after like your 30th, let's just say, maybe after that, putting huge milestones on the decades after, just, I guess if you put too much emphasis on it, it could be kind of limiting, because then it's like, oh, it's like 40 and like it's this big deal. But I know people who are like in their 40s and they feel like they're in the 20s, because it's just a state of mind and how they take care of themselves and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of room for longevity these days,
Yeah, you have your advancement in sports medicine, obviously nutrition is a big part of it, and playing sports helps to keep you young at heart, and like I'm still playing, I'm feeling good, maybe not as quick in terms of recovery after a hard match, but I'm still feeling good on court and keeping trim and keeping fit. Like I was with a couple gentlemen the other day, and both of them are just 40, and they're not my friends or anything like that. I was just with them, and they asked me, well, how old are you? And I looked at them and I said, well, how old do you think I am? And they said, man, if I had to think, I would say maybe like 32, 33. I was like, I wish I was 32 or 33. And they're like, well, seriously, how old are you? I said, well, I'm 39. I'll be 40 in a bit. And they're like, no way. And they asked, well, what do you do? I said, well, I just play squash and I play volleyball, and that's it. And they're like, man, that can't be the only thing. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much how my life is set up. I just play sports, enjoy life, and that's it. And like I said, they're both 40, and I could look at them, and I thought they were a little bit older, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess in their minds, they were like, oh, he looks youthful, still in good shape, and so forth. And I think that translates back to, as I said, if you really keep active in life and you make I don't want to say just sport, but if you keep active, whether it's whatever form of exercise, and you could do it from a young age and carry it right through life, it would definitely do well for you.
Yeah, I 100%. I always, when I was young, I don't know if you knew me when I was like a kid, but I was like an overweight kid,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I finally lost the weight in my teenage years, like I was left with like like a real body image complex,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, I spent my whole life like making exercise a big part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like have to run every day, like have to at least get a workout in, and this went on for about I'm 31 now, maybe like I would say 15 years. Where religiously I would have to be moving, and then but lately, in the last couple of years, I noticed I've been, I won't say like slacking off, but it's not been as a priority, because obviously, you get older and have other priorities. And I have definitely felt, the change. Whereas like if when you leave your body and don't pay attention to it too long, you really notice the difference in how you feel. You start to seize up, and you don't get like a lot of like, you don't feel as limber, and even psychologically, you kind of feel like there's something seriously missing because you've been doing this for so long.
Right.
But I think like that constant movement and just exercise really allows you to, like you said, stay youthful and be limber and energetic, and just you feel good about yourself. And a lot of people maybe don't aren't able to carry that for long periods of time. I think more obviously athletes are more better positioned to have that as a part of them, because we compete and stuff like that. But it really goes a long way. I just I couldn't stress that enough. I think that's one thing that people should really look into. Like, what is just like walking every day, doing something, getting moving.
Just get moving. I completely agree with you there. There's no downfall from it.
Yeah.
I think the only thing on our end, because we're competitive at the competitive level, is that you get your additional aches and pains, and you know, I think that comes with it. You know that's part of the territory, but you know you accept that and just go on and keep pushing, and you make sure you get your massages and you stretch and you try to, as much as possible, ensure your body is well taken care of. You know.
Yeah. I want to talk and I will pivot to, one of the big things we were going to talk about, like the Caribbean squash and, what that is. I know this is a lot of squash people would appreciate this, but, we've both been playing Caribbean squash for a while. And I think we can both confidently say that it's been a massive part of our development.
For sure.
Yeah. And,
sure.
And I noticed you didn't talk much about your volleyball career, but because of like what, and just to compare it, right? You know what Caribbean squash has done for you as an individual, not only the competition, but just being part of that community. And many people because squash is not necessarily a mainstream sport,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know the value. And it's funny because at both junior and senior level, and a lot of my friends who play squash, I remember one time the Junior Caribbean Squash Championships was here a few years ago. And a friend of mine who plays squash could never get his wife to come down. She's like, it's not really for me. I don't really into squash or whatever. And he brought her down during the Junior Caribbean Championships. And she saw like all the kids running around and the competition going on and the bonds that they made from kids from different islands and countries. And she was instantly kind of hooked, because she was like, when we have kids, this is the environment I want my child to be in. And that's the kind of thing we were so fortunate to have growing up and then continue into our senior career.
Yeah, boy.
And I don't know, like, the reason I bring up volleyball is because, like, is the environment similar to that? Because what squash has is quite special.
It actually is. And for me, how I look at volleyball, I love it. Obviously, you have to love to do something as long as I've done it for. But, squash has always been my first love. And I guess my true only love, right? But it's a similar setup in volleyball. I've had friends from my junior volleyball days all the way up to now. My best friend, we both played volleyball from secondary school right up to the junior national team and even the senior national team. So I've had lifelong friendships as well in that area. One of my godsons, his father played on the senior national team with me as well. So I have a number of friends throughout the Caribbean in volleyball. It's similar, but it's not. I don't think it's as close knit as squash. If I was to kind of compare the two, I find squash is very, very. We're very close. Like, and we don't even need to talk to each other on a regular basis. But if somebody asks you a question or asks you to do a favor, I don't think you even think twice about doing it because of that relationship you've built up over the years. And that's one of the beautiful things I find in squash, that you could go anywhere and you have a friend for life.
Do you think the retention of people, like consistent participation in squash, is higher than a lot of sports? Like how long people stay in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the sports I've seen or I've been in, because, for example, with volleyball, after a while, you can't jump anymore.
Yeah.
People will stop playing. So, they start to fade away from the sport itself. And whereas with squash, you can have your aches and pains, but you would, continue to play with people at your level.
Yeah.
So you still have a competitive game with people at your level. So that's what I find on between the two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. And also I think like with squash too, the fact that they have really put a lot of resources into masters, which is like, for people who don't know, masters is playing beyond, having categories beyond the age of 40 or 35 in some instances, or 30. It is really, I mean, you could look as old as you may feel at whatever, you can still look forward to a master's career, which also like really changes the competition as well.
Yeah.
It's like it's really like a different sort of environment, competitive environment you get into those post 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the Caribbean did well in the last World Masters Championships in Poland in 2022. Nicolette would have won. It was the over 35 that she won. Karen Meekins from Barbados won the over 50. Mark Seeley finished third in the over 60. Richard Chin, he finished third as well.
I think he was third or fourth in over 50.
Over 50.
Yeah.
And then I know the guy from Cayman, he won the over 70 as well. So, it's shown that you can still continue after playing in the Open. You can still continue to do well into your master's career. And I've seen that throughout the Caribbean, where we have representation on that end.
Yeah. How do you think in terms of Caribbean squash over the years, how have you seen it grown, let's say within the last 10 years, like from where it was then to where it is now?
Well, I could give you a 20-year span because
20 is good. I mean, I feel like let's do 20. I only say 10 because I know a lot of people. I feel like we've been in it forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I could remember as far back as 20. I think it was 2007 when we were playing in Jamaica. And then in the middle of the tournament, there was a hurricane, and then
Hurricane
everybody
Dean.
had to hurricane. Was it Hurricane Dean? It might have, I think it would have been Dean. Anyway, but people had to flee the country, and then some of us got stranded. Do you know I was one of the people that got stranded?
Oh, you had to stay in Jamaica?
I had to stay in Jamaica. Or the room we were living, well, luckily they moved us out of the club hotel into like the Pegasus next door, because the manager of the Pegasus is a Guyanese guy. And the room we were staying at caved in.
I heard about that room.
Yeah.
Okay.
It caved in.
So that was the room that you were in. Oh shoot.
Dude, it was
changed.
I know. We had to. They told us we had to evacuate the hotel because it wasn't the integrity of it wasn't, I guess, good for like a hurricane. The only good thing about that is I got to meet Jack here, because for some reason or the other he was stranded in the Pegasus as well. But yeah, no. But like stories like that is like kind of what makes like this experience so crazy, because like you would have like tons of like CASA stories, that just sort of define your life, your key moments,
Yeah, because I mean, like I made my senior CASA debut in 2001 in Freeport, Bahamas. I was 17 at the time, so I've basically grown up in the sport, right? And back then, squash has developed so much in the last 20 years. But if you were to even, as you said, kind of pinpoint to the last 10, I've even seen a bigger jump in how the game is played from a tactical point of view. The game itself hasn't changed too much in terms of shots and so forth. It's just tactically, it's gotten a lot more intricate. Because I view this sport, I've always viewed this sport as a physical game of chess, but it's gotten even more developed as we've gone along. And Caribbean squash has developed, in my opinion, where the talent now isn't just in a few countries. Barbados and Guyana, we've always gone at it where we've done well as overall champions and so forth. But now you're getting more of the Bermudas, Cayman Islands, BVI, where they're doing well because the talent has, grown in those respective countries. And I've been happy to see that, because you just don't want to have small pockets of talent, and you want to see the Caribbean growing as a whole. And I'm quite happy to see that. I'm really, really happy to see that.
Yeah, it sucks when, and don't get me wrong, I love winning. I love when Guyana wins, But when there's like winning is one thing, but when there's one country like dominating is when it gets kind of boring.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see different countries putting the effort behind building their programs and bringing the juniors up and stuff like that. And even on the individual level, like you've had the past, before the last year, the past 10 years before that, you've seen Chris Binney from Jamaica dominating squash, and he sort of put, well, other than Nicolette, he's also helped put Caribbean squash on the map with his efforts in the game and his career, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And as much as, I love Chris and looked up to him throughout a big part of my career, it was almost nice to have him not play last year.
Yeah.
Because I thought like it really changed the dynamic of the competition. Because, even though there were a few guys at the top that separate themselves, the tournament did feel like anybody could win it. And I thought that was the first time I've been to like a CASA.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is exciting how free game this is. You go in there and you're like, wow, like anybody can take this, and I think like that's the kind of level or competition we should aspire to, so,
Yeah,
I
agree.
And obviously there'll be outliers like Chris for sure, in sports in general, but having that sort of, that closeness is like, I think what makes the competition and the event so much more enjoyable, not only for the players, but for the spectators too.
Yeah, because I could give you an example going back to that first year that Chris won in 2009 in Cayman. There was a bit of a transition that you were moving through the Caribbean at that point in time, where the younger brigade they were coming through. So like 2005, the champion would have been James Bullock from Jamaica, and then 2007 was Gavin Cumberbatch from Barbados, and I would have been right in that mix, and I won the Southern Caribbean Championships here in 2008. So like going into the 2009 championships, it was pretty much up for grabs, because I had disposed Gavin as Barbados' number one, and basically been like the de facto number one in the Caribbean, because I had beaten him. I had beaten Colin Ramazra, who was number two. So going into that championships, it was pretty much an open field, because we knew Chris was also doing well at Trinity. Colin being as consistent as he was, we went into those championships, and it was let's see who would actually win it this year. And Chris came through, played a fantastic final against Colin, and I played him in the semifinals, and we went to 4 games. And then what was interesting is literally 2 days later we played any team matches, and I beat him, and I was like, why didn't you do this 2 days ago? But that was a turning point. And then Chris went on his run, barring 1 year where Richard beat him in 2010, but he went on his run, and as you said, it almost felt like, yeah, once Chris is here, it's pretty much sewn up. You had some good finals over the years with at least 2 or 3 times with Cameron.
Yeah.
That went to 5. And I think he had a 5-setter against Lewis Waters as well. So, it's not been easy, but, you felt like, yeah, you'll have to play very special to beat him. But like you said, last year was the one year that I think people went in saying, okay, if I play well, I have a shot.
Yeah.
I have a shot. And I mean, I felt maybe if you could have avoided if you could have avoided Cameron, I think you might have felt, maybe have a
Yeah, no, for sure. The way I kind of see it is like, well, and I will admit, I think as far as the the draws go, I mean, it's always competitive, and I think what I like about this too is that there's more depth in the game now. So it's not like,
Yeah.
okay, four top guys. So if you're in the contention of winning it, things get hard in the semifinals and the finals. By round the 16, things are significantly hard.
Hard.
Which I think is great because it changes the whole dynamic of the game. It's like I really have to manage my gas tank from like the first match I play till the very end.
Yeah.
And I think like that for somebody like me with my style of play, it kind of I feel a bit more comfortable there. Not even because I feel like I'm fitter than the other people, but it just feels like I know they have to give so much as well, and then I can try and exploit that when we run into each other.
Right.
So it's a really mental game, and I sort of look at it like, and I would love to have a podcast one day with like a ton of squash people talking about it, or just even a discussion, to be honest, because I feel like we don't really talk too much about this, like I guess for competitive reasons or whatever, but like it's, how the game is approached by different people. It's just fascinating. And I just feel like, when you're out there competing, you always have like a different, the way I approach it at least is I feel like there's a different way to just approach a different player. And I always wonder, like, what are they thinking as well,
Yeah. Because as I said, it's a physical game of chess. So you're plotting, but you also have to understand your opponent is plotting.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are they going to do next? You're always thinking, what are they going to do next? What are they doing? And even before you get on court, you're like, is Alex going to bed?
Yeah.
Did he go to bed? If he, like, is he
They
getting
have
enough
breakfast
rest?
today,
Did he have
yeah.
breakfast? What did he eat? You're always checking each other out. And it's interesting. Like even going back to what you mentioned about the round of 16, and I could share this with about Kamal, for example. I just thought that he had one of the hardest draws for a number one seed. Like he had Julian Morrison in the round of 16, and then ran into Micah in the quarterfinals. Then went straight to Julian Jervis into the semis, and then Cameron into the finals.
Yeah.
And all of them are gritty players where he had to just go flat out in terms of saying, okay, I can't be flashy. I can't just look for short rallies. I have to put in the work. And coming out of that, his body would really hurt after the finals, and he still had to balance playing doubles with me. And I think when we went into the doubles finals, he basically said, Shawn, I'm hurting, and I said to him, don't worry about it. I don't care if we win or lose, but what I'll try to do is to make Cameron run as much as possible, because you're playing him in the individual finals later that day. And he said, Shawn, I appreciate you because I'm playing with you for doubles and we want to win, but you're willing to focus more on my individual accomplishment than sitting here and playing for the doubles. And I said, come on, at the end of the day, I want you to win because if you win, I win. That's how I look at it. I don't really care too much about myself at this point because I've done what I wanted to do in squash.
Yeah.
And I want to see other people do well.
For sure. And I think like that same attitude is like kind of what differentiates certain teams from others, because you can have like, and I've seen this like throughout playing over the years, is that some teams will come in with like the better players, but they don't really have the chemistry to manage like expectations or deal with upsets in a way where it doesn't derail the whole team. And I found that teams who have like a unit strategy where they move together, the wavelength of everybody's is the same. I think people don't really understand how effective that is. And I think I could only speak for Guyana really, but I think that has been sort of our strength. Because when we operate within CASA, we're very, like, there's an expectation of you, you know, and I don't know if people pick up on this, but like, it's like, you know, if you don't really comply to what the vision of the team is and the goals we've set out, you know, you know, it's, you not will face repercussions, but there'll be judgment, you know, in terms of like, it's disappointing if like you and I are on the same team and you decide, oh, well, you know, I kind of want to go out tonight and have a drink, but we got a match tomorrow. Like, you'd be condemned for that, you know, like, we can't, obviously you're an adult, we can't force you to, you know, but it's like the quote unquote shame is enough to be like, okay, I got to get my shit together, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of really important, especially in team sports.
It is.
And, you know, like, we really show up for each other. I mean, something I was talking to Coach about this in our podcast is that, you know, Nicolette just saying, oh, like, I'm just going to go and play the vets because we need people to play vets. We don't have a full vets team. Our women's team is deep enough. Let me go over and play the over 40s so Guyana has a better chance of winning. She has no business being in over 40.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, she, so I think like just that kind of mentality of doing that is really what makes it, you know, very competitive and, you know, also fun. If more people do that, it's also more fun now because there's like doubles and there's vets. So there's more competitions to play that count for the overall title. It's not just men's and women's anymore.
Correct.
Which I think makes a significant difference in terms of how you manage your team. So it goes beyond now just playing squash on the court. Now it's like, how do even the manager has to be involved because he's like, how do I manage my team to get the most out of them so we can win in the right places? And sometimes that even means that like, okay, well, we'll just have to take a loss here so this person can rest. And then we're good for the next match. So, and I love that. I think that's like real strategy and, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot of strategy in it now.
Yeah.
With doubles especially being brought in. And what's happening is you have to figure out, okay, do I want to have maybe one strong doubles team or 3 strong doubles teams?
Yeah.
All right? Or do I want to have 2 strong double teams or 3 strong doubles teams? You have to figure out how can I maximize my points, right? But still managing the load on your players because if they're playing or getting deep into the individuals and then deep into doubles, granted doubles is only 3 matches because you just play a quarterfinal setup, but it all adds up when you get to the end, especially once you get into that team competition. And some days you may have 2 team matches, and then it's like, oh, well, okay. For example, last year which was a bit tough again, as I said, kind of going back to Kamal. He came off of playing individuals, doubles, and then we had first day of teams. We had 2 team matches.
Wow.
And again, he had to play Micah in the morning, and then turn around and play Julian Morrison again in the evening. And he was just like, man, Shawn, I am dead.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just as you said, it's just like it's very interesting though with the doubles in. But just going back to what you said, when individuals finish, I felt that you guys were gonna put Nicolette into the over 40s for some reason.
Yeah.
Just as
we
you
had
said.
we had a lot of depth in the women's. That's why.
Exactly. Because I looked at it and I said, you know, I looked at our women's team and I said, without Nicolette, they could still beat us, you know. And it would help their vets team. But it was just a thought.
Yeah.
And then when I got called into our Barbados team meeting, and then Michael, who would have been the manager, he said, yeah, you know, Nicolette is playing vets. I just smiled because I was like, I figured that, you know. That was gonna happen. Because at the end of the day, you need to maximize where you're going to collect your points from. Because going into that, you know, we would have had a pre-meeting and we were thinking, okay, based on the individuals submitted, we were like, well, okay, Guyana doesn't have a deep team in the vet, so we'd be able to pick up maximum points there. But as I said, once the competition got underway, something just popped into my head. I was like, I feel something may change.
Yeah. But for us, it just made sense because, you know, it just looks better as well, you know, coming back, not risking it, you know, because you, at the end of the day, and again, coming back to our earlier conversation with funding, like, it goes a long way for us to dominate as much as we can, to have to go and claim it, to say, okay, Olympic Association, we've dominated on the Caribbean level. You know, we need this money so we can compete higher, you know, like, so that's kind of like a driving factor. So there's a lot of interesting things pushing, you know, the sport forward in that regard. And I love that. And we talk about making compromises, and it even comes down to the fact that, like, you know, in the individuals, everybody has their own goals and expectations of themselves. But then there'll come a point too where, you know, you'd have to make a call. Not nobody's making a call for you, but you kind of have to decide, okay, well, I've already lost and now I'm trying to win the plate, for example. So I need to figure out, do I want to push myself in the plate to try and win it? Or, you know, do I need to save my body because my team needs me as like the number 5 or in doubles, you know? And that's a call we also had to make at a certain point with one of our players, you know? So it's like really like, at the end of the day, it just comes back down to management and what's going to give us the best chance. But yeah, you know, and then at the end of that that 7 day of brutal competition, it's like, you know, it even comes down to the wire with points, you know?
Yeah.
Because I know, like, there was an instance where, like, at least the last time where one team was announced to have won something, and then, you know, they had to go back and look at the points, and it ended up being something different.
Correct.
I was actually wondering, like, you know, when it's so close, and you've been in this position a few times, and so has Guyana, like, how does the team sort of deal with disappointment versus like, you know, victory? Do you think you guys handle it well?
I mean, I think so. Because at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control, you know.
Yeah.
And whatever you do on the court, that's what's important. You know, if you know you've done you've given your best and you got whatever results, if you finish first, second, third, you can't go back and kind of whine about where you fell in terms of the points. Now, if you felt, as you said, you know, you didn't compromise and you push yourself too hard and then you were out of gas, and then you could be like, if I had managed this better or so forth. I think that's where the disappointment may come from, rather than where points are a little bit close and then it's like, just missed out on first or just missed out on second.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, for example, there was a little mix up in how the vets points were calculated, and that caused a shift in where Barbados finished overall. I think if we had finished a bit higher in the vets, we would have finished second overall. But because there was that slight mix up, we ended up finishing third overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a little confused about what was going on, but it didn't really matter to me at the end of the day because I did what I had to do on the court, and that was it.
Well, I think that's like the best way to look at it, right? Because it's like I think our rule of thumb is that, like, as long as we know we've left everything out there in terms of like what you said, what we could control, the rest will take care of itself.
Correct.
You know, it either happens or it doesn't. And obviously, yeah, you could nitpick and blah, 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 but it's just, you know, it is what it is. I think, like, you know, again, especially having a successful run for a couple of years, I'm sure has fueled a lot of fires. Whereas like people are like, you know, well, you know, F these guys, be coming for them next year, you know, and there's the kind of same approach like we have, like, too, like, it's just fun competitiveness.
For sure.
But what I do love is the fact, going back to the community too, is that when all this is done, you know, we could just sit down and have a great time together. And I think that's so special about the community, you know, and which is why I think that should be the selling point with the sport as well, because it, you know, it's character development for all the people involved, you know, especially the younger people.
Yeah, I actually, we were talking about it yesterday at the club. that squash is such a more than just the actual going on court. You're building friendships from a young age, and even if you don't do the junior program or the junior CASA and you come in at a later date, you're still going to have lifelong friendships. And even if you're not going to have just that friendship side, it's a lot about networking.
Oh yeah.
And because of the diverse makeup of our community in squash, you get to network a lot with everyone, in terms of all walks of life, from the business exec down to the regular guy. And just by having that opportunity to be in that space, you can get a lot done, just by having a conversation, because you have access to that individual, and you would know, all right, is that person approachable or not? And most of the time, people in squash are very approachable. They're not closed off. I mean, you may get one or two, but most people are accessible and always willing to help others within squash.
Yeah. What amazes me is how also like how many of us in the region have been able to achieve higher education through squash. Like I think like my parents just always told me, they're like, if you don't figure out a way to get a scholarship, you go into university again, like, and we're sorry, we just can't afford that education for you.
Right.
And myself and a number of my compatriots have been able to get a full ride and have an experience just because we played squash, just because we put that effort into the sport.
Yeah.
And if more young people can actually realize that option exists, especially because we're from a very like niche region, and a lot of these schools they want people from this part of the world, with these unique, diverse experiences. I think that's a good selling point for getting kids in, and obviously you want to do it for the right reasons as well. But it's just like people like us really do owe everything to this sport.
Yeah, you're so right there. Like, just going back to when maybe one or two individuals would have been picking up university scholarships. Now, you as you transition along from the 90s to the early 2000s into 2010s, and now every 5 years you've seen an uptick in how many Caribbean individuals are picking up scholarships, and it's now even changed from just university scholarships. Individuals are getting into boarding schools.
Yeah.
At the high school level.
Have you ever been? Sorry to cut you, but have you ever been to any of those boarding schools?
No, I've not.
Shawn,
Not.
I forgot to. I was actually had the privilege of going to one before college, just for a year as a post-grad year. So I completed up to 12th grade here. And the idea was to go to boarding school for a year to then apply for college while I was there and write the SAT 2s and all this. And I went to one of the, I won't say it was, by no means was it a lower tier, but just compared to the higher ones. My own had an endowment of about 80 million. The top ones had about like close to $1 billion.
Jeez.
And these schools are like crazy in terms of the resources. They have more resources than a lot of universities because all these the elites that attend them, I guess, just go on to like donate back to the school, and it's just tons of money pouring in. So you have just these top of the line everything, like the best gyms, the best courts. There's a whole physio department for athletes, you can go. There's the music program is amazing. The science programs are amazing. Like everything is like top of the line. And I actually kicked myself because, when I was there, I was out of my element. I just left Guyana, gone to the freezing ass cold, and I just spent a lot of my time kind of sulking, like, oh, I just got to get my SATs done, and I gotta, do this. And there were so many things I couldn't capitalize on,
Right.
But when I look back, I'm like, if anybody from our community had that opportunity, I feel like the world is your oyster, And just because of squash, like I got that
Got
privilege.
opportunity, yeah.
You know, even when I left, a few years later, Nick Matthew ended up coaching the school. Yeah, so you know, it's like these are only things we can dream of.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. I mean, like, just talking to, like, Kamal, for example, I think he was one of our first that took up the opportunity for boarding school.
You went to Avon, right?
Yeah, he went to Avon. And he, after his first semester, he was like, Shawn, this is so different. Like,
Yeah.
what they have at their school surpassed anything he's seen within the Caribbean. And that's just for squash.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, man, they have so many squash courts and the access that we have as students. And they plan out basically your whole day, right? So you're just falling into a system where, you know, it's kind of made easy for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he was, I guess, grateful for is the level of education here in the Caribbean, where, you know, he was able to just seamlessly fit in from that end and do well.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, maybe he would have been more like a B student here. He was an A student there, which was all good because at the end of the day, that helps your situation as a student athlete, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I always felt when I moved away, I don't know if my personality at the time was a bit inward, but I always felt out of place. Like you know, kind of like when, you know, Caribbean people go to the first world. To me, at least, was my thought, and maybe it's a Guyanese thing, but I always felt like a bit lesser than, you know. I don't know, like that people. I didn't have the experiences that people were accustomed to there, and I may have not been very comfortable being myself. And like through simple things like having to change my accent a bit so people could understand me better, and like, you know, those things are real. I think like that was like a psychological toll on me that was just one of the few negatives that maybe affected my experience. Like if I were to do it over again, I would just be totally like, I don't give a crap. Like, you know, what anybody else thinks other than me, you know?
Yeah. I could share this with you. I remember the first time I went to the U.S. Junior Open, and it was Gavin, myself, James Bullock, and his dad. And this was being played at Princeton University that year. So we're walking into the building, and, you know, we know where we're going because we're following James and his dad. And security looks at us, and we look at security. We continue walking. But, you know, when you could feel eyes on you, you know, we look back at security. Security gets up and starts walking towards us. And James' dad was like, don't worry about it. And I was 15 at the time, right? So I was just going about my business. And then security comes and he says, may I help you? And we were like, well, as I said, James' dad then said, well, yes, we're here for the squash tournament that's going on. And he said, you look a little lost. And he said, no, we're not lost. I know exactly where we need to go. And I picked up on what the security guard was trying to say. And I just laughed, right? And Mr. Bullock then said, so you're telling me I don't know where I'm going? And he said, I think you're a little lost. And he said, no, I know exactly where I'm going. I'm here for the U.S. Junior Open. It's going on downstairs at level. You got to go down the elevator, and the squash courts are below. And the security guard was like, where are you from? And he said, we're from Jamaica, and these two boys are here from Barbados, and we've come a long way, and we don't want to be delayed any further. And the security guard was like, oh, I didn't know that squash is played in the Caribbean and so forth. And again, I'm just standing up there laughing because it's funny to me that here it is, here in the U.S., we're not just all, you know, one race or whatever you want to call it. And you're finding it funny to see other people playing the sport. And I understood why he said that once we got downstairs, because I had to look at the draw, And I was like, shit, we're the only people here from the Caribbean. And I looked around and I said, oh, we're the only black people here as well too. And that just opened my mind to what it was, because again, coming from the Caribbean at that point in time, where we were predominantly either black or Indian, or it's like yeah, that's what we're accustomed to.
Yeah.
And then and because we get along with each other, there's no I keep to myself or whatever. It was a little bit strange to me just going up to the U.S. And it wasn't my first time being there. I've been there for vacation, but again, you're going to visit family, right? But that was the first time to open my eyes, and I was like, And as you say, you have to change your accent when you're talking to them, because if you kind of speak as you normally would speak, they go and say, huh, what did you say? And I just got tired of repeating myself.
Yeah, I think that for sure, and I think that's one of the biggest things is like I hate having to repeat myself.
Yeah.
Just to hold my ground of whereas like this conversation would just go better if I accommodated you. I'm gonna do you a favor.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know something though, squash has had that that rapport. It's gotten way better now. But I think like it's obviously one thing that has held back the sport is that it used to be it's labeled a rich people sport, and it's certainly not the case anymore.
No.
And it's like, I guess a big part of it is the access to courts, which is like the thing holding it back, and the fact that a lot of these courts were traditionally built in affluent places, whether it's like country clubs or private facilities or whatever.
Yeah.
Guyana's actually made a big leap forward in building a ton of public courts, which I'd love to show you if you have time.
Actually, not to cut you, I actually went with Lloyd from Fat.
Oh, this trip?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
nice.
went on my second day.
Oh, okay.
So he took me across to the racket center, and I saw the facility.
Yeah.
The walls were up and everything. I was very amazed by
Really?
by how much work is done after 9 days. They told me.
Well, I haven't been yet, so you see more than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since the new section is built, I haven't been.
Okay.
But I gotta go check it out. Yeah, but my point is that like we're finally gonna have like that ability to include more people, because traditionally in Guyana, even though it's we're primarily in terms of ethnicity black and Indian, like our courts have always been at these private clubs, like the Georgetown Club and GCC and Everest, and there was actually a reporter a few months ago that wrote this article on squash, and basically tore into squash, saying that is squash basically the headline was something along the lines of, is squash Guyana's rising sport, or just another exclusionary elitist niche that only certain people have access to? And the whole article basically hardly spoke about the program and focused solely on the fact that squash is just being played at the Georgetown Club, where the common man doesn't have access to, and that children who aren't of a certain economic class cannot access, which is extremely not the case, because the Georgetown Club is open to all the juniors on Saturday. Anybody can join.
Right.
Their coaches, they're coaching whoever privately. And half of our national players don't come from affluent backgrounds. So it was just a very misleading article. But the irony was that the reporter never contacted the GSA to even query any of this information, right? So it was just like he had no contact with anyone. Because I actually asked to meet him after, and I said, and we sat down, and I'm like, who did you contact from the Squash Association to get all this very critical information?
Yeah.
He's like, I actually didn't, I just kind of consulted with my other reporter friends, and this is what I came up with. But the reason I'm doing this is because I want to give the association an opportunity to respond. And we're like, why should we engage you after you've just sort of made this hit piece.
Correct.
And not recognizing anything the sport has done over the past how much ever years, the amazing, again, the opportunities children have gotten for education, the accomplishments we've made. You know, somebody like Nicolette, how she's put Guyana on the map.
Correct.
But you just sort of made this, you just reductionistly made this like a thing about a private club. And then the irony also is that he's also a member of a private club. He's part of the Georgetown Cricket Club. And I'm like, do you not see the irony here? Is
Yeah.
that you went all in on squash being part of the Georgetown Club and you're part of your own private club.
Private club.
So I don't understand what this was about, you know? And he just was like, didn't really have the answers. But what it opened my eyes to is that, like, you know, how damaging, like, criticism is fine.
Yeah.
It's totally, and I think it in theory, it should drive sports.
drive, yeah.
That's a big, but criticize the performances, criticize the athletes and what they're doing or where they fell short. Make it interesting, make it fun, make it where I could read this and I'm like, I going out to prove this man wrong next time. Don't do it just to bring down the whole sport.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like you really try to tear the sport down, and it's like, why would you do something like that? You know, and then, and another ironic thing was that he wrote it in an editorial without, or as a letter or something, and didn't provide the name. So there was no response to that.
Response, yeah.
You know, like it was just, to me, it was like, you know, why would anybody try to do something like that?
Especially, as you said, you guys had a fantastic year last year and have had for an extended period. Why would you turn into the sport and not do your background check?
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
To find out what I'm hearing from, as he said, his other reporter friends. I want, and that's good journalism too. You know, what I'm hearing from one end, I should be able to go to the source.
Yeah, go to the source and at least look for comparisons.
Exactly.
You know, but it's like, you know, my biggest beef with it was the fact that it just pushes this narrative that this game is only for a certain class of people, and that's totally untrue.
Totally, and you're so right there. Like, even back home, when squash we were looking for additional funding, people say, "Oh, you know, y'all could afford it," and I go like, "No, like the association needs the financial support. Yes, you may have some business owners that play the sport, but you also have to understand that you don't know how well that business may be doing if they have the cash to be able to support. You don't know if they're already supporting other sports and meeting their budgets and so forth. So you can't just say that, oh, you have people that are business people and people that have money, so to speak, within the sport. They may be doing other things, and or they may be already supporting the sport. And, you know, there are different programs that the association may have to put on, or the club may have to put on. And I could say, for instance, as the president of our club, that, you know, we have very, very supportive members that contribute from a financial point of view. They do advertising boards. If we want to put on a tournament, they're more than willing to support whatever tournament we may want to do. So we do get that support, but at the end of the day, we still do our fundraising events outside of that, because we know that we can't just rely on that support from our members, right? And I just look at it from the point of view that squash has to, hopefully, the more we can get out there, the more they can see that it's not just affluent people that play the sport.
Yeah.
And as you said, if you can create, going back to what we talked about, just that, what we've seen playing the sport, creating friendships, the opportunities are out there for further education. That needs to be more the image pushed rather than, people in suit and tie and business owners that can afford to play the sport.
Yeah. Well, Shawn, it's been a total honor talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on and making the time for me. This was a really nice conversation. I'm glad we got to do this. I guess in closing, I would just sort of ask you, you're playing such an instrumental role in carrying up the next generation of squash players and young athletes. And you are a national athlete in two sports. Sports has been a big part of your background. I always like to leave something for my audience, and like this is all about like knowledge sharing and expertise sharing. Would you mind just sort of giving a piece of advice for like whether it's like up and coming athletes, juniors, parents of young athletes, what is your sort of philosophy on, the role sports should play in a child's life and how they can maybe just our conversation use that to develop themselves and to hit the goals that they want to.
Well, first of all, Alex, thank you again for the invitation. I was very happy to have this conversation, and we always talk, even outside of this forum. And as you said, we've had a long friendship, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and Gyaff with you. But as you said, a piece of advice I would give is, as we mentioned, sport is very important in life. That's how I look at it. And it taught me from an early age how to balance my time between sport and education and the importance of sport and education. I wasn't fortunate enough to take up a scholarship overseas. I did have an opportunity to go, but I didn't take it up. And it just came at the wrong time because I had already completed a year and a half of university at school in Barbados, the University of West Indies. And then my dad was just like, you're going to have to do 4 years in the U.S. and you just have 1.5 more years to finish here in the Caribbean. So that was the reason why we just said, we'll miss this boat. But as I said, and we've talked about, the opportunities are endless if you put your mind to it. And I'm not just talking about from getting a scholarship, but just thinking about going back to the most basic thing, which is what got me into squash. I remember Gavin Cumberbatch, we grew up together. His dad is my godfather. My father is his godfather. And he came to me a day and he said, Shawn, if you keep pushing, you can make the junior national team and we get to travel around the Caribbean and meet people. And that sold me. Mm-hmm. And that was my main focus, to try to make the junior national team. I just wanted to go around the Caribbean and meet people. And I think it's the best decision I've made in my life, just focusing on that. And, being here now, sitting with you and having a conversation here, somebody I could reach out to and ask for anything, what that would be my advice to a young person, that do whatever you want in life, but do it full and find what that motivational factor is. It will do you well. You'll find that balance in life and, have conversations with others in the sport who may be a little bit older than you. Parents, if you're not in that sport, reach out to somebody who is in that sport or whatever activity you're doing, and so that you can find your balance. Because if you try to navigate it by yourself, you may get lost, you may get discouraged. And then from the parents' point of view, I think if parents could have a little bit more discourse with coaches and those who in the sport, to kind of find their footing and know their role. I'm very fortunate for my dad who plays squash. He's here also in playing in the tournament. He never took a commanding role in my sporting endeavors. He just said, "This is what you want to do. All right, I'm going to support you. I'm going to make sure that you go to whatever trainings you have. If you need equipment, we'll see how we can, get you the best, not really the best, but we'll get whatever you need, And he never was one who said, "Oh, I'm going to be up in your business. I need to know exactly what the coach is doing. I need to know why the coach is doing this." He said that person is a professional. I won't want somebody coming telling me, because he's an accountant, I won't want somebody coming telling me who may be a lawyer how to do my job. And that's how he approached it. And he's continues to act that way. So I would say for parents, be supportive of your kids, but really take that information from those who are the professionals or have been kind of put all their life into it, whether it be a top player, coach, whoever, and that's pretty much it, man.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming, bro, and good luck. Good luck in the future. I'll see you next year on the court.
Yeah, man, for
see
sure.
What happens.
Me this year.
Oh, this year. Sorry. I'm still in last year.
Yeah.
Nice talking to you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you.